What's up, guys? My name is Lee Robinson, and welcome to Mastering Next.js. Mastering Next.js is the complete guide to Next.js, and we're going to talk about how to build production server-side rendered applications using Next and React. So if this is the first time you've heard about the course, I'm going to give a quick overview about what we're going to cover, and then we're going to dive into an introduction into Next.js. So if you haven't heard of Next.js, that's okay, but you might have heard of React. Now, React is a very popular framework for building web applications, and Next.js is built on top of that. So companies all over the world are using this framework to build best-in-class performance, scalable applications. And this course is going to teach you how to construct those applications. Now, Next has a few principles that it abides by. It has a zero config setup, which makes it really easy to get apps built off the ground fast. It's extensible, so if you need to override the defaults it gives, it makes it really easy to provide escape hatches to do whatever you need to do. And finally, a really big one is server-side rendering. So instead of rolling your own server-side rendering approach with React applications, if you use Next.js, you just get this for free out of the box. So in this course, there's going to be a few different example applications. We're going to talk about a bunch of different features with Next.js, and it's all going to be broken down into some different modules that have lots of different lessons, lots of good stuff. So today we're going to be talking about the introduction, and if you think this is interesting, then swing back and check out some of the other content here soon. So really, as long as you know kind of basic HTML, CSS, JavaScript, and React, you're going to fit right in on this course. I'm going to do a refresher to React in the next module, and that'll get you up to speed if maybe you're just a beginner in React. So I'm really trying to make it very beginner friendly, and all of the code will be open source at the end, so you can swing back and reference it as we go along. So without further ado, let's jump into Next.js. So Next.js, like I said, framework for building React applications. Well, what does that mean? It essentially extracts some of the things that lots of people were doing when building React applications and makes it a lot easier. You might have heard of another similar approach called Create React App, which drastically simplified the approach into getting these applications off the ground. And Next.js kind of takes it a step further, in my opinion, and makes it even easier to build full applications, not just the front end features that you might want in an application, but everything from API routes to putting in TypeScript integration and just a whole suite of features that we're going to talk about. And I've seen just a huge adoption in the number of people who are interested in React, who are interested in Next, and I've been working with Next now for over a year at my job in my professional setting and then also on my own personal sites. And I found that it just makes building web applications so much easier. I've never been this performant and this, I've never been able to build sites as fast as I can now using Next.js. So I wanted to share my knowledge with the community, give back with this course, and hopefully you guys are going to learn a lot of really good information and be able to build just best-in-class web applications. So before I even get into Next.js, I want to talk about why you would even use a framework, because there is a group of people online who say, well, you don't need React for that, or you don't need Vue, or you don't need Angular for that. You can just do it with vanilla JavaScript, vanilla HTML, which is 100% true, but there are caveats to that. So let's look at a tangible example. I had a freelance client called Beyond HQ, which is a startup that helps other startups expand their offices outside of Silicon Valley to other places in the United States, kind of building that hub number 2. And they came to me and they said, we have these requirements for building a new website. We want to have a splash page. We want to have an about page, some frequently asked questions. We want to have a contact us form. We want to have a future platform for building SaaS in this website. Now, when you're looking at this website, you might think, okay, yeah, this is pretty straightforward. You could probably build this with just basic HTML and JavaScript so that you didn't have the quote unquote bloat of React. But what a lot of these people fail to realize is that the nice thing about sites that use Next.js is you can still use them for static websites. And that's one of the big features that I think differentiates Next from a lot of the other players. Not only can you do dynamic custom sites that have API routes and all sorts of, extra functionality, you can also do just really simple static sites that are blazing fast. Now, when I say static sites, I mean, I write these in React, and through the compilation process, Next will take care of converting this down to just basic HTML, CSS, JavaScript, which means that you can, one, cache these pages, and two, they're going to get served up faster because they're going to be smaller than loading an entire React application. So that's exactly what I've done here. This site uses Next.js for everything, but these static marketing pages, these about pages, all of this, not that one. I think there's a FAQs page. All of these pages, it's all just static HTML, JavaScript, and CSS. And that makes it really, really fast. But then we can still build in information into here. I'm not going to actually submit this because I don't want them to get it. But then this fires off, an API request, and it brings it all together. So you can do a lot with this. And I think that's one of the things that people don't realize when they're saying, okay, do I need a framework or do I not need a framework? You have to kind of think about the future of the product or platform that you're trying to build. So for example, with this, not only do they have static marketing pages, I also built a SaaS product into their website that allows you to find the city that you might want. So I could say, my company is a 50-person company and we want to hire 50 people and, they're engineers or whatever. And sure, we're in San Francisco and we want to go to New York. And this is a very dynamic site, right? I'm not even going to fill that out. So it says, okay, here's some cities that you might consider choosing. Let's pick this one. And this page on load, it's talking to a database. It has dynamic content coming in, and it's fully loading a React application on the client side. So inside of this one application, we have static pages and we also have dynamic pages. And that's the beauty of Next.js, is you can do it both. You don't have to pick one. And I think that was why I ended up choosing it for a lot of the things that I work on, especially for my blog. I wanted to have a static blog, but I also wanted to have the ability to capture leads in a contact form and do all sorts of other things like have a dynamic view counter. And it allows me to kind of augment the static functionality of just a good old-fashioned blog with some other really nice stuff on top. And that's one of the benefits I get from using Next.js. But if we think even further out, if you work at a large company, medium-sized company, the choices that you make, these technical choices, they affect other engineers. And the real value in using these frameworks is the productivity of all of your developers. So having this zero config approach where I don't have to worry about setting up Babel or setting up Webpack or some of these other tools that have made web development maybe a little bit more complex. The real value here is that there's this shared knowledge and code reuse that we get out of using a platform that abstracts some of this stuff away from us. So now we can build our products faster and still get all the value that the engineers behind Next have put into making performant, fast React websites. So as an individual, why would I want to learn Next? Why would I want to learn React? Is it going to help my career? Is it going to help me get better job offers? Is it going to help me progress professionally in my career? And luckily, I feel I jumped on the React train, as did a lot of other people, and it's kind of been a rocket ship that has just taken off. Now, this doesn't mean that it will stay that way forever, but I think right now, more than ever, is a great, great time to learn React and also to learn Next.js. We're seeing popularity for Next just go through the roof, and the Next.js team just keeps releasing feature after feature of amazing different work. And this shows through download count. So if we look at NPM trends to see how people are actually using these packages and installing them, React is just blowing away some of its peers, which means that it's a great skill to learn right now. If you want to build web apps, if you want to be a JavaScript developer, I think that GitHub just came out with a survey where it was the #1 language used, JavaScript, on GitHub, which means if you're using JavaScript, you're building web applications, you probably want to be using React. And like I said, if you're using Next.js, you don't have to compromise. You can do static sites, you can do dynamic sites, you can really do it all, which is just an amazing part about Next.js. So another core feature of Next.js is server-side rendering. So this allows you to build this scalable, performant React code without having to worry about, rolling your own server-side rendering mechanism, which you'd be surprised, but a lot of companies have done before because they just don't realize that you can get it for free with something like Next.js. Now, why would you want server-side rendering? One of the biggest things is for performance. Server-side rendered sites usually serve up the pages faster. Secondly, for SEO, search engine optimization, it's not that Google or other search engines can't parse and process React applications, because they can. It's just not immediate. So if you want to have the best SEO and get the best results when publishing your website out, you want to serve that content from the server so it can be immediately found on Google and other search engine sites, which has a huge impact on the discoverability of your website. So if you're building, large company, massive websites, this is going to be a really, really important thing. I know that at my job, I work on a e-commerce website that's used by millions of people, and we have to have server-side rendering for critical pages because we need to make sure that we don't lose any piece of our SEO. So I've mentioned zero config a couple times, and I want to just explain what I mean by that. So I touched on nobody wants to set up Babel and Webpack, and it's largely because these tools are just confusing, especially Webpack, and there's a lot of configuration hoops that you have to jump through, or ridiculous errors that you have to try to figure out and look through Google. And that's one of the nice things about Next.js is that it gives you those configurations out of the box. It supports all modern browsers, even IE 11 right out of the box. So you don't have to do that. But if you absolutely need to, it provides those escape hatches for you to combine things how you want. And I think another big thing for zero config is how we handle routing. So with a traditional React application, you have to use React Router to decide which routes you want and how you direct traffic to each one. And with Next.js, it takes a little bit different approach. It does file-based routing, which I really, really like because it just simplifies the entire developer experience. So if I have pages, which is where all your different routes live in this pages folder. If I have pages/index, that's the entry point into my application. Pages-about, all I have to do is make a new file and boom, I have a new page. I don't have to configure React Router. I don't have to set up any other configuration, and that's all it takes. Okay, so let's take a look at an example of a Next.js application that's using code splitting so you can see the benefits of only loading the JavaScript that's used on that page. So like I mentioned with Create React App, it's going to pull in all of that JavaScript into a single bundle, which as your application grows, you want to split or do code splitting so that you're only loading what's on that page. Now, there's a caveat to this. It is possible to do this using React Router or Create React App, but with Next.js, it's just easier. It's already that way out of the box, which ties into that zero config approach. So if we go over to a new terminal, I'm going to run this command, which sets up a brand new Next.js application using Create Next App. And on the right, I'm going to open up this new application, and we're just going to take a look at some of the source code. We're going to run it locally, and I'm going to show you how it only loads the code for which route you're hitting. So let's run yarn dev. That's going to start your application. Well, I got to cd into it first, and then run yarn dev, which is going to start the application. And if we go over to pages index, this is the entry point into the application. If we go over to localhost 3000, here it is. Okay, so welcome to Next.js. If we edit pages index, you will see hot reloading work. So welcome to mastering Next.js. Boom. Okay, so if we look at the network tab, you'll see right now it's loading index.js, which is the JavaScript used on this page. If we were to take this file, make a brand new route that is about.js, and it could pretty much do the same thing. We could just make this say about. And I go to about. Now you see the name of the JavaScript is different. Now it's only loading the code that's used on about.js. And this is really important if, you know, this class is really not doing anything too crazy. Maybe it's only going to have, you know, a little bit of code and maybe no styling. Maybe it's just really simple. Maybe it's just this, right? So now when we look at the size, about.js comes in at 72 kilobytes and index 75. So not a huge difference in this, you know, small example, but this really matters as your application starts to scale and your pages get bigger. Another thing that I want to show is server-side rendering. So if we go look at the elements, which is the markup that's being served, when I reload this page, you'll see that the content is getting populated from the server. If I were to do the same thing with a Create React app, it would not be served up like this. So for an example, I have a Create React app called My App. So I go into this directory, I run yarn start, which is what Create React app uses instead of yarn dev. And with this application, you'll see that there's this root element and everything gets rendered into that root element. So it's really, really quick right here, but what can happen on, you know, slow performance, I could try doing slow 3G. There's nothing in root right here. So this is simulating a really slow connection, nothing in root, nothing in root, nothing in root, boom. Okay, now my application loaded. And this is just one of the problems with not having server-side rendering is there's nothing there. So when these crawlers go to index this page, that's one of the benefits of having Next.js. While, you know, it's not like this is going to be fast either, at least it's going to wait and it's going to give us that markup from the server. Oh, whoops. I need to go back, go to the Next.js app, and let's run that again so I can show the next example. Okay, so the network's still slowed down. So you see that even though it's waiting for the rest of the JavaScript to get on the page, it's already served this markup from the initial server. And that's a really, really good thing. Awesome. I'll do a hard refresh one more time, just so you can see. Awesome. Okay, so you might be wondering, okay, that seems helpful. It seems like that would help you build a website, but why would I use Next over something like Create React App? Or even, you might have heard of a framework called Gatsby. You might wonder, okay, when would I use that? And really what's the advantage of using each one. I feel like it's really confusing right now, and there's not a good there's not a lot of good material out there explaining the differences between them. So I'm going to try to do my best so that you can understand, okay, here's when I would use one, here's when I would not use the others. So like we've talked, Next.js is great for a lot of things, but the biggest one that sets it apart from some of the other solutions like Create React App or Gatsby is that it's server-side rendered. This is really, really helpful, and it's a big differentiator against the other two because nobody wants to do that themselves. So for Next, in my opinion, getting that server-side rendering out of the box is huge. Plus, you can do dynamic sites and static sites. And there's all these little goodies that are built into Next.js, like built-in TypeScript support, and it's a really awesome developer experience. But there are a couple things that aren't as good with Next that are in some of the other frameworks. So there is some framework-specific knowledge that you need to know, which I guess it's debatable of whether that's a game breaker or not, but it does require you to know some of the intricate pieces of Next, and we're going to touch on what those are. And eventually it's good to have that knowledge, but it might be a barrier of entry to some other people versus a different framework. There also isn't a plugin system yet, but that's something that's coming. And Gatsby, for example, already has a plugin system, which helps you pull some of those reusable pieces of code off the shelf right away. I think the key difference between Next.js and Gatsby is that Gatsby doesn't use a server. So most people use Gatsby for static sites. It can, rehydrate into a full React application on the client. But I think when people compare these, they forget that Next.js can also be used for static sites. So you'll see a lot of people use Gatsby for blogs or, other similar things that maybe are backed by CMSs that just serve up that data. And it does do a really good job here. As that scales to potentially thousands of pages, I know that one of the downsides with Gatsby, at least in its current state, is how long it takes to build all those pages. Another thing that's a little bit different with Gatsby is that it uses GraphQL. Let me see if I can find, So if you've never heard of GraphQL, it's essentially a query language that allows you to fetch data, and you express your data or you express what you want as kind of pseudo JSON, which it then returns JSON. A lot of people see this as added complexity. Like, why do I need to learn GraphQL to build these sites? I will say, if you like GraphQL, if you take the time to understand it, it can be very helpful, but it's also a barrier to entry of using the framework. I think the biggest thing with Gatsby that I like is the plugin library. There's a lot of really nice ones on here that take care of some things that you might have to roll yourself, like image resizing or setting up your site to be able to run offline. It's nice to be able to just pull a plugin off the shelf to use these things. And then finally, swinging back to Create React App, where are we at here? Create React App is definitely the easiest to learn because it's just React. There's no extra framework. All it is, no frills React, which is great. And it's, made and supported by the React team. So you're always getting, the newest features directly from the people who make the framework. I will say, though, that it seems like a lot of applications now are trending towards server-side rendering, and they don't have any plans, as far as I know, to add server-side rendering into something like Create React App, because the people on the React team even suggest, okay, well, if you need that, then you should just use Next.js. It already does it better. We're not going to, bundle that into the easier, kind of point of entry into learning React for some of these people. A second one, which again kind of differs against why I like Next.js, which is routing and code splitting. You can do code splitting, but you have to configure it. Whereas with Next.js, you just get it out of the box. And then routing is a similar story. You have to configure React Router to set up your routes, whereas Next.js, again, it's just the file-based routing. So in my opinion, I think that Next.js is just easier overall to build websites. And that's why I advocate for it. That's why I'm making this course, is so that I can help other people build web applications as fast as they possibly can. So hopefully, after this introduction, you now understand, why would I use Next.js, the fundamentals of Next, what really make it this excellent performant React framework. You understand some of the things like zero config and all of that you get for free out of the box with Next.js, like code splitting, server-side rendering, static and dynamic sites, and you understand the differences between Next.js, Gatsby, and Create React App, and maybe when I would use one over the other. So with that, thank you for tuning in, and stay tuned for the next lesson. Cheers.